You are listening to the Zeebzob Pinewood Derby Roundup, sponsored by Goat Boy Products, makers of high-quality Pinewood Derby tools. And now, here's your host, Zeebzob. Hello again, everyone. Welcome back to the Zeebzob Pinewood Derby podcast. This is episode number 4. I am your host, Zeebzob, coming to you from the Zeebzob studios in Mukwonago, Wisconsin. Hope you noticed that I got a new microphone for the podcast, and I'm hoping the sound is a little better. The past setup I had was 2 USB headsets. One of them seemed to work a little better than the other. If you notice back to the E3 interview, the headset he had was not the good one, so he kind of faded in and out. The interview with Quad Dad, I gave him the better one because I wanted the focus to be on him. But as we go forward, now hopefully some of those sound issues will be taken care of and we can enjoy a better podcast. Okay, for this week's show, I just want to take a little time and talk about some of the tools that we use for Pinewood Derby racing. Some people may be getting into the hobby for the first time. They've got questions about what tools to use, what to buy, what to avoid, things like that. I'll talk a little bit about my track setup, and we'll touch on some staging techniques. Now, my staging techniques are fairly basic, but we'll go through some things you can do. I had some questions prompted to me over from an email that was sent to me from a newer user. He wanted me to touch on some staging techniques, so we'll go over a little bit of that. He also wanted to know, what you can do to eke out that last little bit of maybe 5 milliseconds on some of these cars, or when you're talking about the bearing cars, even less. If you can get an extra 0.02 of a second, it's pretty tough to do. There's a couple things to try, but to be honest, if I knew that, I'd be a little higher in the standings than I typically am. Okay, I also do want to mention that my forum is zeebzob.proboards.com. The blog that these podcasts go to is zeebzob.wordpress.com. And again, my Twitter handle is @Zeebzob, so you can follow me there. I did get 2 new Twitter followers, so thank you to BartHart1. He was the first one to go ahead and follow me after listening to the podcast. His name is Scott Bartnick, so shout out to him. Also, a guy named Jay Moran. So thanks, guys. And whenever I do these podcasts, I'll for sure tweet that a new podcast is out. So subscribers, you should know. Also, Twitter followers. I may not always post them on the forums. I don't know whether the forum owners really want that, because I don't specifically talk about their league, so I'm not going to push it there. I'll post it to my forum, but at any rate, @Zeebzob, follow me there on Twitter. Okay, some of the tools necessary for building a good Pinewood Derby car. Let's just start with some of the basics. What you really need is good alignment. You need your axles working together, especially the rear 2. Those need to be perfectly in line with each other. The front one, obviously, since we bend it anyways, it's not quite as important, but you definitely do want to make sure that is as accurate as you can get it. So some of the tools for that is the Jukes have the block. Derby Dad's got the silver bullet. Those particular tools, you need a drill press to use with, and how it works is you clamp the block of wood onto basically what is a large, heavy aluminum block. the wood block slides in there. You clamp it to it, and the principle behind it is that because the block of wood is rarely perfectly square, that you get in your kits, or even if you cut wood from blanks, like if you go to Lowe's or Menards or whatever and get a piece of 1/4 inch poplar and just cut your cars from that, or even if you get the premium sugar pine blocks from some of our vendors, you can't always guarantee that they're perfectly square. So you mount it to the aluminum block, and then that is milled to be square. You put that on your drill press table, and you can flip it over once you drill the first hole, and then you know that you're perfectly parallel and perpendicular to your other holes. So speaking of drill presses that you need, when I first got the block from the Jukes, I went out and bought a Craftsman drill press, and it works fine. It's just like $100 drill press, one of the benchtop models, and that's fine. As I was getting further into the hobby, and I thought, I'm not keeping up with some of these faster guys. I thought, well, maybe I just need a better drill press. So I went and I started looking on the internet at some other options. Now, I know a lot of guys use the Proxxon. It's a small hobbyist drill press, and it's supposed to be fairly accurate. But I went with one called Cameron. It's a Cameron 164. If you look it up, it's a very small but very precise drill press. It's got very minimal runouts. And if you've seen the thing, they're like, maybe 15 or 18 inches high. It's really, really small, but it's really expensive too. It's a new one of those is like $800 or $900 or some crazy, ridiculous price. But I found one on eBay for about $250, which I was happy with the price. So I got it, and it's a fine tool, and it really does drill nice holes with very little run out on that chuck and spindle. But the old adage that a poor craftsman blames his tools, it's absolutely true. Once I got that drill press, I really wasn't any faster. So I was looking for, a magic answer, and that really wasn't it. So if you guys are thinking that your drill press is what's holding you back, it probably isn't. If you go to some of the sites, like I know Derby Dad has touched on this a lot, where your drill press really doesn't need to be perfectly square to the table. And he explains it pretty well, how as long as you use the block or the silver bullet, the design of that will allow that even if your drill press isn't square, the holes should still be perfectly in line. The car may dog track a little bit where it's not quite going perfectly straight down the track. And what I mean by straight is not that it's, wobbling back and forth. It's tracking straight, but it's kind of, cocked. It's got a little bit of a yaw to it. So, that's one thing that can happen. But as Derby Dad explains, it won't really affect your speed. It would just affect how the car rolls on the track as far as, if the rear wheels are equidistant to the rails, they might be slightly closer on one side, but it should still track fine. All right. Also for drilling the holes for the axles, Derby Works has a tool, the Pro Body tool, which I'm sure everybody has. It's, I don't want to really rag on anybody's tools, but the Derby Works line is, they're more of scout-driven tools. They're inexpensive, and they're fine for the scout level. If you're a dad out there that wants to do a little more than just use the slots in the block, and you want to drill some holes, okay, this will get you through. It'll help out, and your car will improve from it. But if you step up to league racing, you'll know that tool, it's not designed for what we use. It won't cant your rears. It'll wear out because it's just I don't even know if it's aluminum, but it's some kind of metal with just a hole drilled that you put the drill bit through. So But again, every league racer, you talk to them, they're going to have a drawer full of DerbyWorks tools because that's how we all start out. And then as we go, we get, tools that are designed a little bit more for the league racer in mind that'll, last longer and give you better results. But along that same type of a tool, Goat Boy has his axle tool, which is the one that I've been using lately. It's really nicely made. It's aluminum with some hardened bushings in there, some drill bushings, so it's not going to wear out. It's got a choice of either a straight drilled hole for use that for your fronts, or if you're using it to build your bearing cars where you've got the solid rear axle and you need the two holes perfectly aligned to each other so you can drill all the way through the block and put that solid axle in. But it's also got a set of holes that are offset by 3 degrees so you can cant your wheels. Like I said, that's the one I've been using a lot because it's really easy. You can use it with a pin vise, or even, I use mine with a little electric, a battery powered drill, just a drill that I use at a lower RPM, but I know that those drill bushings aren't going to wear out. I don't use a carbide drill bit or anything, but it's worked flawlessly for me so far to this point. So that's a good tool. But I guess the disadvantage that one has is, it's got a set axle height, but the one that it has is one that's been proven pretty well to be a decent axle height. The block in the Silver Bullet does give you that flexibility of being able to maybe put the axle holes a little higher up in the block to lower the car a little. But again, you're going to need a drill press with that. So that's just another expense that you'll need to incur. But I'm sure you're going to want to get these tools anyways. What I use my Craftsman drill press for now is basically for any milling that I do. I bought a cheap little XY table from Harbor Freight, and I can mount the wood block in that XY table and mill with it. I put a 1/2 inch end mill into the chuck. Now, just a little warning, a little bit of safety. A drill press is not designed to mill like you would on a milling machine with a lot of side load. You can, because the chuck is on a taper, and that can come off and obviously be a very much of a hazard. So what I do is I plunge mill. I just move the block on that XY table and I just plunge straight down with the end mill. Then I just, raise the bit, move the block of wood a little bit and plunge back down in little steps like that. It's not very efficient, but, I don't have a milling machine. So that's that. Some other tools that I have here, let's talk about sanders. I have a belt sander that's got a drum sander attached. You've seen them. It's got like a 6-inch wide belt, and then the drum sander is probably maybe 8-9 inches in diameter, maybe not even that big. But I got that from Home Depot. It's like $100 or something like that. Not too bad. But that is sanding sucks. So that will remove a lot of material quickly. With that belt sander, you can really get the bodies flat. And then with that disc sander part of it, you can, round corners and do things like that. Whereas if you were just sanding it by hand, that's not so fun. I also have an oscillating drum sander, so that will sand out my inside curves and little crevices like that. Then, of course, Dremel tools with the sanding attachments. So I try not to do a lot of sanding. When I build my cars, I take a body that's a 1/4 inch thick to start, and then I will glue like a top plate on the holes that I mill out for the weights. And to tell you the truth, I don't even mill them anymore. I use a saw, and I'll get to that in a minute. But then once the holes are there, I just glue a piece of 1/64 plywood over the top of it. So, because that'll make the body lighter to begin with, and then you can fill it in with that plywood. so that's got a top, and then that requires very little sanding. As far as saws, one of the big questions is, scroll saw or bandsaw. I take a bandsaw every day. The scroll saw, I have one of those too, and it's nice. But the bandsaw makes quicker work, straighter cuts, and you'll be happier if you're thinking about what choice to make. Definitely go with the bandsaw. The scroll saw I use for inside holes. Like I said, I don't really mill anymore. What I do is I just draw out the shape of the holes that I want, and then I, drill a hole in it, put the blade through from the scroll saw, and just cut it out that way. So, and it goes pretty quickly. The other main tool I have is I've got a little lathe from Harbor Freight. Now, take it for what it is. It's just a real small 7x10 lathe. It's cheap. It was like $400. I think I had a coupon to get like another 10% off or something like that. So the reason I got that is because I wanted to make my own wheels. Now, that being said, there are machinists out there like Goat Boy and BSB and Owens. They've got access to really fantastic equipment, way more than any of us would have access to normally in their shops. Not only that, they've got the experience to make all these parts very precise and much better than I ever could. Now, I did go to school. After high school, I went to a technical college for tool and die making, so I do have some knowledge with machining and stuff, but nowhere near what these guys have that have been doing it for 20, 30, 40 years or whatever it may be. So what I can do on that little lathe, probably take me an hour what these guys can do in 5 minutes, and they'll do it better every time. So, but I do enjoy doing it myself. So if you want to, cut your own wheels, I say, by all means, go for it. That's, part of the hobby, something you can learn to love to do. Just don't expect that, the wheels that you're going to turn out is going to be as good as something you can get from Derby Dad or from Jukes or any of the vendors like that. Maybe someday you'll get there, but at first, you're going to get some clunkers out of there and you're going to get a lot of scrap. So, if you're looking at it as a money saving thing, that's not really what you should be looking at it as, because for the money you spend getting not only the lathe, but the cutting tools and the gauges and all the measuring equipment and everything, you can buy many sets of wheels from those guys already done, and they're going to be done right. So, but like I said, if you do have an interest in it, yeah, go ahead. It's a lot of fun. So lately I've been cutting bearing wheels. I actually had Goat Boy make me a spindle, or a mandrel, if you will. And I've been cutting my own acrylic bearing wheels. And one of the reasons I wanted to do it, not only because I wanted to do it for myself, but, I was kind of tired of always asking Ian, hey, I got another broken wheel. Can you make me another set? I felt like a schmuck all the time, but he was, he was always very accommodating and gracious and would always do it for me. It just got to the point where I, hated to ask him to do it for me again. So, again, that's a little lathe. So those are my main tools that I have when I build a car. So now let's move on to the track, some staging techniques, and maybe a little bit of tuning. As far as my track, I've got a Best Track 3-lane, and I use a Micro Wizard timer. The software I use is Grand Prix when I do hook that up. So I do have the Grand Prix race software, not that new testing software that was developed. I know Mario touched on that briefly last time. He was working with Randy Lasano on helping him get that developed. Some input for Randy when he designed that software. And I saw the demo version of it. It looks pretty cool. Lots of data that you can plug in there. And I have not explored all that yet. So one of these days we'll probably do some kind of like a review of software, and we'll definitely touch on that then. But the track, like I said, it's a Best Track 3-lane. When I set that up, how I do it to level it is I've got little some feet that I made. Now you can go out and you can buy the leveling kit, but I just made some with some furniture feet, with a quarter 20 screw on it, and I have a digital level, and I take some 1, 2, 3 blocks, and I put the level on the 1, 2, 3 blocks to go across, so that I know that the very outside lanes are what's getting leveled side to side, and then I level it. I put the level in the middle of each section to get it as level as I can, and then I'll move onto the next one. I usually start at the finish line and move my way forward till I get to the curve section. Then with the curve section, I use the level in conjunction with those 1, 2, 3 blocks again on the flat part, but the part at the top of the curve, I had Ian make me these little, they're like little hill checkers, I call them. You put them on each side of the outermost lane, and it gives you a flat surface to put your level on. I did make a post on this on John's board with some pictures, and they're really cool. So I, kind of drew these up for Ian, and he made them for me, and they work great. So I put those on the top of the curve section, get that level side to side. Then I attach the hill section. I get that level to 27.1 degrees. And a lot of you probably wonder, why such an odd number. It just, that's what was used on the Jukes track at PDDR. They were the Premier League, and everybody wanted to make their track equal to theirs, so that when they tested, they had some kind of a basis to judge what their cars are doing. And so, we would always ask, what's that hill set at? And finally, somebody measured it out there. It came out to 27.1, and that's just what it's been ever since. So that's what the leagues have kind of used as their standard. And then, again, I use those little hill checker tools that Ian made for me at the top of the hill to get that leveled. So one thing to be said, but once your track is leveled, and I also use a laser line to make sure that it's straight. I wish I had some pictures of this. Actually, Terry from APR Cash Racing, he's got this really cool tool that I wish I would have gotten a couple pictures of when I was out there, that he uses to level his track side to side, and it actually helps him. Excuse me. He uses the laser to get it straight, but it also helps him get them side to side, because it's got a vertical line that the laser goes on, and basically, if the tool that's got that line is not right with that laser, he can tell that section is slightly off kilter, and he can adjust it from there. It's probably something you have to see to know what I'm talking about. Maybe one of these days we can get some pictures of that posted. It's a pretty cool thing. But one thing to be said is, once that track is leveled and it's straight, when it comes to staging, if your track is set up right, you can almost stage it any way to get a good run. If your track is if your track's got some problems, then staging can definitely play a big part of how your car runs. But for the most part, for me, what I do is the front dominant wheel I will have just touching the rail, and then the two rears I will have equal distance from the rail. And I pull the wheels out to the heads of the axle on a car that's got axle heads. Of course, on the bearing cars, those wheels, they don't really have any side-to-side play. I'll spin the wheels, all three wheels actually, while it's sitting there on the hill, just to make sure that as I spin them, they've got a smooth feel to them. If the wheels have any kind of debris, or the track has anything on it, you can feel that. The wheel won't roll smoothly. As soon as you feel that, definitely take the car off and clean those wheels. To talk about cleaning the wheels, some people just put down a piece of paper and roll the wheels on it. That works fine. Some people will use a Mr. Clean Magic Eraser. That'll work fine, except for the razor wheels. I find that they just like slice right into that magic eraser. The thing that I use is it's basically like a nail buffer for your fingernails. If you go to like Walgreens or wherever, you'll find these foam blocks with four sides of basically like very, very fine sandpaper glued to them. And they, start with step one, go through step four. Typically, I won't really use step one. It's not rough by any means, but I'll usually start maybe a step two and just give it a quick once over and then concentrate more on steps 3 and 4 to really clean and polish those wheels up, because you definitely want clean wheels. Just to tell a little story, one time when I was testing a car, it was actually my 55 Chevy door slammer for the PDDR race. It was, not too long after I first got my track. And I was, just making run after run after run, and the car was just not what it was at the beginning of the day. And I couldn't really figure it out until I actually took a look at the wheels, and I could see, that there was just a lot of crud getting built up on the surface. So then I, raided my wife's fingernail tools, or supplies, I should say, and I found one of those nail buffers and cleaned the wheels, and the car picked up like 20 milliseconds just from cleaning the wheels, and it was back to where it was earlier. And it was one of those duh moments where I couldn't believe that I hadn't thought of that or noticed it earlier. But at any rate, clean wheels are definitely a must when you're when you're racing Pinewood Derby, so keep that in mind. But as far as getting back to tuning, one thing to really check if you really want to see how your car runs, it's called the slow roll. That's what this technique is called. You just take the car right on the flat section and just push it very slowly, so the car just kind of rolls along, and the car will then show you where its natural position is. Now, whether the rears are perfectly centered off the rail, or if the car kind of moves and settles in maybe slightly closer to the left side or right side, whatever. If you can kind of see where it's rolling, that's probably where you're going to want to stage it. So but like I said, typically I can't go wrong if I just stage mine perfectly centered on the back. Now, I mean, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people who really dive into this and give you a lot of technical, geek speak, and, well, clearly if the car is centered and it doesn't really like to be centered on its slow roll, then you are losing energy as the car does settle into its natural position. So, you'll get some people talking like that. But every car is different. So, go ahead and if you have a track, definitely test it out, whether it likes to be slightly off the rail in the front, tight to the rail, what have you. Five Kids Racing, Scott Law, he has a little technique that he shared with us on his site, and he shared it in the forums, where he'll make a little notation by the front dominant wheel. If that car needs to be staged on the rail, he'll put a little letter R for rail. Slightly off the rail, he'll put the letter D for daylight, just so you can see some daylight between that wheel and the rail. And then if he wants it hard off the rail, he's got some other, I'm not sure what it is, but I know, I think the X, if he puts an X on there, he wants that to be basically like the dominant wheel up against the rail, and the non-dominant wheel up against the rail, and the dominant, as far away as it can. So again, play with it. As for me, I typically just stage it the same every time. If you get real fancy with a lot of these staging techniques, the thing that I found is you may get that run that's really fast, but you may not be able to repeat it. The way I do it, it's pretty much the same every time. So it is what it is. And I know that, when you do send these cars proxy, other people are staging it for you. They may not stage it exactly the way you want, and then your first tendency is to say, "Oh, I got a bad stage." But I'll tell you what, David Jukes, Joel Redford, and Terry Cooper, these guys have staged thousands and thousands of cars. They know what they're doing. They're not going to give you a bad stage. They're going to do their best every time. I can guarantee it. So, don't play the part of, oh, I got a bad stage or what have you. Sometimes you do get a stage that is not optimum, but that's how it goes. And I guarantee you, even if I was there myself, I couldn't do a better job. So I put my trust in those guys. The leagues, they do their best, and it's in their best interest to do well for you. So I know a lot of people do like to complain about it, and it's easy to do, and I really try to make an effort not to. And I thank all of those guys who do a great job of staging. So, all right, one other thing, tuning. My big thing, and again, take it for what it's worth. I've got some good cars in the bearings, but not much else. What I do is I'll try to steer that car as little as possible before, without it wiggling. So if, for example, if I've got, 5 inches of steer over 4 feet and a car's running straight, I'll back it out. See what it does at 4.5 inches, still running straight. I'll back it out to like 4 inches over 4 feet. If it starts to get a little bit of a shimmy, I'll put it back to that 4.5 inches, just as an example. And again, every car is different. I was talking to one racer, one of the top guys, and he was telling me about one of his street stocks that had like over 12 inches of steer over 4 feet, which, just sounds crazy to me, like how can it have that much steer and still be so fast? But, don't get hung up on the number. If you're used to your street stock having like 4 or 5 inches, all of a sudden you got one that, needs 8, but it still runs great and it's still fast. Don't worry about that. Just tune it to where it runs best. Okay. Now for the, your razor wheel cars, your bearing cars, and your modifieds and eliminators, those cars typically will require less steer than your fat wheel cars. Okay, so for example, a lot of my bearing cars over 4 feet, maybe an inch, maybe an inch and a half. Ian, Goat Boy, his car Mach 1, the yellow car that he had a few years ago that he was really dominant with, that car had like a 1/2 inch of steer over 4 feet. So very, very little steer. But, if you build a car exactly like that, maybe the next car would take an inch. Sometimes there's little tiny differences, whether it would be the weight placement or what have you. You can try to build them exactly the same, but they don't always perform or react exactly the same to some of the adjustments that you have. Now, the biggest thing I can say that'll help you, I think, is get yourself a video camera. And maybe something that's got a little bit of a slow-mo feature on it. Otherwise, you can always slow it down if you upload the video to your computer and you use some video editing software. You can slow it down. But in the slow-mo viewing of it, that's when you can see what that car is really doing. Now, after a while, you can kind of pick out if a car's got a little bit of a wiggle or a shimmy, But I tell you, in real time, it's happening so fast. You might think the car is going straight, but if you videotape it and you slow it down, you'll see things that you never saw with the naked eye. So that's something that'll be amazing. And when that really came into play was a number of years ago over at PDDR. When they would film their races, they would have the side view, but they would also film from the front, like basically from the finish line looking up towards the start section. And they would slow that down and you could really see those cars moving around. And I was like, whoa, and not just like any whoa. It was like a Peter Frampton whoa. So, if you can get a video camera and look at your car, you'll see things that you never see with a naked eye, and that will help you tune it a lot. So I don't always do that just because I'm somewhat lazy. I think if I do that more often, I might have better results. But it's definitely something that'll help you do it. So, that's about all I have. One other thing I do want to mention about tuning, though, getting back to that, is check the rules. If you're allowed to stage your own car, one technique that I saw one racer do that it actually worked pretty well. The front wheel, when he would put the car up against the peg, the front wheel wasn't actually touching the track at all. It was slightly off the rail and slightly lifted. That was old Donaldson Gravity, DG13, if you guys remember him, and his name's Paul Sparkman. Paul, if you're out there, come back. We miss you. You're a fun racer to be around. But he showed me that little technique, and it actually worked for him. Now I don't do that very often. I'll try it once in a while just to see if I can get a couple extra thousandths out of it. Sometimes it works on some cars and sometimes not, but it's definitely something that, if it's allowed, give it a try. Maybe your car will react better to it. Again, you don't want it to be like, a quarter inch off the surface of the track. We're talking, just like the thickness of a couple sheets of paper, if that, maybe just one sheet. So a couple of thousandths of an inch. So, but I thought that was really interesting. And he did that when we were at, that race in Kentucky. Goat Boy and I went. That was my first live event. So that would have been a couple of years ago for the the Scouter Nationals, I think it was called. And how that one went was Derby Dad. He proxy raced. He sent the car in, and they were staging his street stock car, and it was doing well. It made it to the finals. But then Paul gave Derby Dad a call and said, hey, let me try something with your car. And he used that little technique, and, Derby Dad ended up winning the finals on that. So definitely something to think about. But that's about it for me on this episode. I do have a test and tune coming up this weekend. Some of the guys will be coming over. Ian's not going to be here. He said he can't make it this time, but we'll have Todd Meyer, Mario, Mr. B, and probably Rocket Car. So maybe I'll try to drag one of those guys in here for a little chat and get some of their some of their stories down and share them out to everybody here. So until next time, this is Zeebzob signing off.